Sound check, 1, 2.
This is the 217 Recovery Podcast with Corey Winfield.
We get it, that's the past, but we need to focus more on having fun and being goofy, being ourselves.
It is the 6th of May, 2020. My name is Corey Winfield. This is the 217 Recovery Podcast. Appreciate you listening. Today, joining me, a very special guest, and I think you're going to enjoy what he has to say. His name is Michael Brody-Waite. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. I just kind of shared with you that it's sunny in Traverse City, Michigan. It's still 40 out, but at least it's sunny, man. You got to take the positives when you can get them.
Yeah, we got dark times over here in Nashville, Tennessee. I kind of miss California, but it's all good.
Now, is it tornado season there now, or?
Yeah, we had some serious tornadoes right before everything hit with the pandemic, and then we had storms actually this week that knocked out 130,000 people's power. It's just getting used to tornadoes as a California kid is crazy because you can actually predict that they're going to happen, whereas in California, the earthquake happens and there's nothing you can do to prepare for it, so there's way less fear.
Right, it's just, oh no, this is happening now. Whoops, what are we going to do? Whereas
yeah.
I lived in Arkansas, and I swear, whenever it was this kind of season, and the news, they want ratings, and they would just pop in, and they every time it was almost like crying wolf, you know. Oh, here comes a tornado, and you just became numb to it. And then one comes to your city, and you're like, oh my god, that was close. Like they were serious that time. But
yeah,
tornadoes are no joke,
it finally
man.
happens. And then it finally happens, and they reference that one like every time. Like, this could be the next time. Just people hooking into fear, dude. Just people hooking into fear.
Yeah, but those are scary. Like you said, earthquakes, you know, like, I'm sure those are scary as hell too, but you don't have people saying, hey, it's coming, and then it doesn't come. You know, you're not really walking
Correct.
on eggshells. It's like, hey, you know, you can't really walk around all day thinking, and I'm sure maybe people do out there, you know, with like, oh my God, it's going to be an earthquake. I can't do that today. You know, with some kind of mental problems, maybe not problems, but just anxiety or something. Who knows? But tornadoes, man, there was one that came through in Joplin, Missouri, and we did, like, at the radio station I worked at, we did this relief drive where we wanted water, and of course people were cleaning out their closets, trying to bring us clothes. We're like, yeah, we don't need this anymore. We're like, no, we just need some water, man. And the people from the hospital came down from Joplin. They were talking to us, and oh my God, some of the stories they were saying was just like, it was crazy. You know, this guy, I guess, got stuck to the building with a stop sign through his chest, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't want to see that. People flying out of the hospital, because I guess it came by and just took the hospital out, and people in their hospital beds just shoom. Tornadoes aren't fun, man. But so yeah,
no, they're not.
At least we're not in a tornado today, Michael. So that's pretty good, you know. Got to look at the.
But hey, we're doing like a weather report, so that's pretty good.
Keeping people in northern Michigan, give them their sun report, and you know, people in Nashville, their hey, it's tornado season report. But no, Michael, you have a book coming out on the 20th.
Yes,
correct.
The 26th.
26th, and the name of your book is it's kind of long.
Yeah, great. I'll do it. Great leaders live like drug addicts. How to lead like your life depends on it.
Okay, great leaders lead like drug addicts.
Live
Yep. Like drug addicts. So what does that exactly mean? Because somebody listening to this podcast probably goes, okay, well, I'm a drug addict, or used to be, you know, I'm in recovery. Like, what does that mean, and where did you come up with that?
Yeah, it's a double entendre. So it has two different meanings. And the first meaning is, when I look at the great leaders in our past, they fixed, managed, and controlled just like an active drug addict, managing perception, never admitting weakness, trying to do whatever they could to get what they wanted and needed. And when I think about the great leaders of the future, I think that they will lead in a fundamentally different way, and it will look more like an addict in recovery.
Okay. Yeah, that's that would be nice if they weren't obviously in recovery. You know, I mean, I'm thinking like the kids. and this is something I was thinking about too. I had to drop my girlfriend off at her job, and I was coming back, and I was listening to one of your interviews on YouTube, and you guys were talking about the future generations, and talking to the ninth graders, I think the guy said, and high schoolers and young generation, and how 50% of their jobs aren't even created yet, like they don't even exist. Yep. And I started thinking, like, are we, because that's something that I want to do, speaking engagements. I want to talk to the kids, and I just want to talk to anybody really that'll listen, and if I can help one person in that room. But I'm thinking, if I help that person in that room, am I taking away his struggle that he might need, or her struggle that she might need to be the person that she's supposed to be? And then I think about a lot of crazy things like that. But then I'm thinking, well, no, because if that's her path, that's her path. And then I'm thinking,
yeah,
well,
you
why
don't have that power?
But why would I go talk to schools then? I overthink every single thing, Michael. And I think that and a fear of failure would be my greatest flaws.
I can relate to both of those. When I was in rehab, they actually told me that that after 28 days, I needed more rehab. And I said, why? They said, you think too much. Mm-hmm. So I can relate.
Yeah, we have a lot of things that we have in common. Just from listening, I'm like, okay, yep. Oh, wow. Yeah. And of course, people in recovery, we can all kind of relate to each other a certain amount anyway. But then there's other people who relate to more, and others you don't. Now, you talked, at least from what I've heard, about, your mom and dad, they were saying, hey, you need to go to rehab, correct?
Yes.
And you were like, no, not yet. And once you kind of hit that rock bottom, as they all say, which I think you still said you had a couch to sleep on. So, I mean, everybody's rock bottom's different. But do your parents...
Yeah, man. So, I mean, I think a lot of people say your bottom is when you stop digging. And that was something that I had to learn. But for me, I mean, I'd been kicked out of my house. I'd been fired from my job. I had been kicked out of my car had been repossessed, and I was throwing up blood, and yet I still wanted to keep going. And the only thing keeping me from sleeping on the street was my buddy's floor and couch. But I was like the worst house guest ever, because I asked if I could stay for a weekend, and then I stayed for months. And when he would go to work, I would steal his money, drink his alcohol, eat his food, and bring strangers over to his house and wreck his property. And so I knew I was wearing out my welcome, and my dad would invite me to breakfast every couple of weeks. And he said he just wanted to buy me a meal, but I knew that he just wanted to see his son was still alive. Mm-hmm. And he would always offer to send me to rehab, and I would always tell him I didn't need it. I got it. But I remember one time after one of the breakfasts going back to the guy who my friend whose house I was crashing at, and him really encouraging me to go to rehab. And I could tell right then and there that I had worn out my welcome, and I was going to be sleeping on the street. And I figured it'd be better to sleep in a bed and get 3 meals in rehab than to try to, actually figure out how to live on the street.
And what would you say was your biggest deterrent to rehab? Was it the whole, I don't know what it's like, or I'm not an addict, or like?
Well, I think I knew I was an addict. I just didn't think that there was a way out. I didn't think that I had just to resign myself to that being my life, and that I would be dead by 30. And so when I thought about rehab, I think I had 2 thoughts. One was, that sounds really uncomfortable, weird, and I don't want to stop using. So whatever they have to tell me doesn't matter. And so I have option A, something that's going to take away the thing that gives me comfort, and it's going to trade it for discomfort. Or option B, just accept that I'm going to use until I die. And that actually was far more comfortable for me. And I think that addicts, my personal experience is, I think that we are like obsessive compulsive in a specific area. We are absolutely obsessed with controlling how we feel. And I would have rather been able to have a predictable experience being numb and high and die early than have an unpredictable feeling and experience checking into rehab.
Isn't that crazy what drugs do to us in our mental state? Like to anyone who just hears you say that, they're thinking, why would you want to do that? Like, that doesn't even sound like a good idea. And you saying it, that doesn't sound like a good idea. But in that moment, at that time, that's what you felt. And that's what a lot of people feel.
Yeah, that's why it's insanity. I think I write in my book something like, people telling me that I needed to stop or go to rehab or I was going to die, that the only option, if those were three options of what was going to happen to me, the only one that didn't scare me was dying. Mm. And that, it's not that I didn't want to live, it's that I didn't know how to. And so I figured if this is the only way I know how to live, this is a pretty terrible existence. I don't know how to do better. You're in a spot where it is truly insanity. I mean, and that's why addiction is something that, in my experience, is the way that you can tell if someone's an addict is if they continue to do something over and over again despite negative consequences, and they actually prefer that versus getting better. And so for me, I would much rather just peace out in the world and keep doing my thing than go through 1 to 28 days of uncomfortable work in order to fundamentally change my life. And I think that's tragedy. And I think so many of us, don't get clean or don't get sober because we take a different option. But I was very lucky that I felt like I didn't have options for where to stay, and then I did have an option for where to go. And I eventually took it when I ran out of all the other options.
And everything had to happen the way it happened for you to be where you're at today. And it sounds like you're very accepting of that, and you don't try to control outcomes. And I know that's something that I've heard you talk about in the talks that I've watched.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that I'm all about right now is those of us in recovery have a tendency to think that we've learned how to live life on life's terms. We are told to practice these principles in all our affairs. We do that. But then when we go to the working world, we have a tendency to think, but it doesn't apply there because the power structure is driven by the normies. And so I can't just be honest. I can't just be vulnerable. I can't just be transparent. I guess I can't just practice these principles here. I have to conform to this world. And so surrender, what you just said, is a really great example of that. Is, one of the things I talk about in my book is that we in recovery have an incredible skill in learning how to surrender an outcome. Leaders in businesses are taught the exact opposite. They're taught to control outcomes by any cost. But what we know in recovery is that you waste a tremendous amount of time and energy trying to and obsessing over focusing on things that you can't control. And it really hurts your ability to actually achieve what you want. And so we're really good at surrendering what we can't control and doubling down on what we can control once we really understand recovery, because that's what we need to do to live. And as a result, we have a competitive advantage over other business people in the world because they never had to learn that skill like their life depended on it. They they don't even get taught the skill. So not only do they not get taught the skill, but then if I were to go in, I go to speaking engagements and workshops and coaching and all that kind of stuff. When I go tell them, if they're not like you and me walking around with a loaded gun pointing at their head and saying, if you don't continue to learn to say and surrender, you will use, they don't have the same incentive that we have to learn how to use that skill. And so you get to flip it, and actually recovery becomes a professional superpower. But it's something that's very counterintuitive for most of the world. And it certainly was counterintuitive for me when I first got clean. You mentioned recovery is it's pretty much like a 24/7, like it's something that we always have to work on because we always like to be high. Yeah. Yes.
And I could really relate to that. And throwing myself into this company that I started, I went to 15 different treatment centers, from California to Michigan. I mean, pretty much all over. And I got to the point where I was at the end of my rope and I was choosing death as well. I thought, if I go to another rehab, I get out again, I tell my mom, my sister, everybody that I'm never gonna drink again. And every time I would get out, I would mean it. I 100% meant it. Every time, I'm not touching it again. I learned this about myself this time. And, apparently I'm a slow learner, or I didn't want to give up what I had thought I had control over, which was, well, in 5 years I could drink again. It's 5 years. This is all going to be water under the bridge, and I'll be able to have a beer and watch the game or whatever.
Me too, dude.
Now I get it. There's no way, one beer, that's bye. I mean, I've just wasted everything. I have way too much to lose now. But then I looked at it like I don't have anything to live for.